This educational video is about the history of the U.S. and Mexico, but focuses specifically on the Mexican repatriation program that occurred in the U.S. during the Great Depression. Mexico is a country that has a history that stretches back 18,000 years. Great societies like the Mayans and Aztecs all inhabited its land. In the 1500s, the Spanish arrived in Mexico and eventually conquered the Aztec Empire, leading to 300 years of colonial rule. The Mexican people successfully revolted against Spain in 1820. Although they gained freedom, the country's standard of living did not change as most people had thought it would, and Mexico entered a depression in 1907. This, as well as the Revolution of 1910, prompted the first large wave of immigration to the United States. Mexico and the U.S. entered the Mexican-American War in the mid-19th century. This war began when the growing number of Americans that lived in northern Mexico, now called Texas, wished for more autonomy, as well as their fear that Mexico would outlaw slavery. The war ended in 1848 with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, where Mexico surrendered almost half of its territory to the United States. Most Mexicans that lived in this area chose to stay in what was now the U.S. They were guaranteed citizenship after 2 years. By 1900, around 500,000 people with Mexican ancestry were living in the U.S. About 4/5 of them were born in the United States. Many things spurred more immigration to the U.S., including the Reclamation Act of 1902, which created a need for more agricultural laborers. As stated before, the Mexican Revolution in 1910 caused many Mexicans to flee their country for the U.S. World War I also created a need for more laborers, and the economic boom in the 1920s attracted many more immigrants. During the Great Depression, there was a lot of hostility towards immigrant workers stemming from the high unemployment rate. The repatriation program began during this time. According to the Library of Congress, immigrants were offered free train rides to Mexico, and some went voluntarily, but many were either tricked or coerced into repatriation, and some U.S. citizens were deported simply on suspicion of being Mexican. Farm workers were the main target of this program, but Mexican Americans of all backgrounds ended up being illegally deported. It is estimated that there were over 400,000 people that were illegally deported to Mexico, many of whom were born in the U.S. and were citizens. The population of people of Mexican descent in Texas and also in Los Angeles was cut by 1/3. Many Mexican Americans even left the United States simply because they were afraid of deportation or unemployment. For those who avoided deportation, life became even more difficult. Many farmers had to leave their land, and many Mexican-American farmers had to become migrant workers in order to survive. Migrant work camps offered some relief, and some camps were set up specifically for Mexican-Americans as they were often the target of violent attacks. These camps caused people to become closer and eventually helped create the first farm labor movements. Mexican Americans that managed to stay in the U.S. worked in every workforce that there was. Railway work became popular because it allowed easier access to the northeastern part of the U.S., allowing Mexican immigrants to move with their families into other non-rural areas. This tragic story of the Mexican repatriation program is one that is often never told when the Great Depression is discussed. It is a sad fact that many educated people aren't even aware that it happened. I hope this short video was able to shed some light on an important reality of our country's past.